Hi, this is Mrs. Tratner, and we are going to be talking about vascular and non-vascular plants. These are the objectives that we're covering in the unit, and these are the goals. We are going to identify the difference between vascular and non-vascular plants. Okay, so we'll do some review questions at the beginning of class, and this will be the notes part of the class, so you want to make sure that you take some notes and listen to the recording pretty carefully. I put the link for this video, it's a song, into Canvas under course resources for you. Alright, so when we talk about non-vascular plants, okay, we're talking about plants that have very, very thin cell walls. Now they do still have a cell wall because all plant cells have that, but they're thin. They're not as thick and as strong as vascular plants. Non-vascular plants do not have a root system. They absorb water from the ground. They grow very low to the ground, and they include mosses, liverworts, and hornworts. So when we talk about moss, a moss grows in bogs, and when these different layers, and moss does grow other places, but one of the main places that it'll grow are in bogs. When layers of moss grow, they call that sphagnum, and then they can harvest that and use it for fuel. And when they harvest it, we call it peat. And they reproduce using rhizoids. So what does that look like? Okay, so here we have moss that's growing on a rock, and it's near a body of water. We have these long tubes that that grow from the moss, and those are the parts of the moss that help the moss reproduce. So from those very long tubes, they're divided into two sections: the gametophyte and the spirophyte. Okay, and then you have the capsule at the top of that stalk, and what'll happen is that in one of the capsules there may be female parts in there, and then in another plant probably fairly close by there'll be male. So what'll happen is that those capsules will open, they'll fall to the ground, and then water and air, mostly water, will carry the male component and the female component, and when those two interact, then there will be fertilization, and then more moss can continue to grow. So here's another example. This is a moss path. You're probably pretty familiar with moss. Liverworts and hornworts might be plants that you're not too familiar with. There are more than 8,000 species of liverworts. Wort is an old English term for plant. Liverworts and hornworts also grow on rocks and soils. Because they're non-vascular, they have to absorb the water. So they're usually in an area where there is water, like a stream or a lake. There are only about 100 species of hornworts, and oftentimes they're very hard to find because they get mixed in with other plant life. So you don't always see them. They're not like moss, where you see moss and it's like, oh, there's some moss. It's on a rock, or it is on a tree. But liverworts and hornworts will grow within other plants, so sometimes they're difficult to see. So this is a picture of a liverwort, and then here's a picture of hornwort. Okay, so when we start talking about vascular plants, which we've talked a little bit about, we've talked about xylem and phloem. Okay, vascular plants have those two components. So we know that the xylem is a set of tubes that helps with transportation within the plant. The xylem helps to circulate water and dissolved minerals through the plant. The xylem will eventually die, and we can see examples of xylem if we were to cut down a tree. And you know the rings that are within a tree, those are the xylem. Okay, and every year the xylem will die and new xylem is built, or it grows on the outer circle of it. So you can see that. Phloem are the cells that are laid end to end, and they transport glucose during after photosynthesis. The phloem always is living, and an example of it would be sap. So when we talk about vascular plants, okay, there are then two types of vascular plants. There are seedless and seeded, which we've talked a little bit about as well. Seedless vascular plants, as we know, are ferns, club mosses, which are not the same as regular mosses, and horsetails. These seedless vascular plants have true vascular tissue. And remember, they do not reproduce using seeds. They have spores, and these plants will grow pretty tall. Ferns, there are about 12,000 species of ferns, and we've been talking a little bit about ferns. We did a life cycle virtual lab with ferns. They have stems, they have roots, and they have leaves. The big branchy part of the fern is called a frond, and then they reproduce using spores. And here's an example. Club mosses and horsetails. Remember, a club moss is not a true vascular plant. Okay? And I'm sorry, it is a true vascular plant. It is not a true moss. Okay? Club mosses and horsetails have stems, roots, and leaves. There are about 30 species of horsetails, and there are very few species of both club mosses and horsetails left. And this is an example of a club moss. It kind of looks like a baby pine tree. And here's an example of horsetail. Okay, so that's the information that we have about vascular and non-vascular plants. What you're going to do in your breakout rooms in class is you're going to do a little bit of research on vascular and non-vascular and create kind of some information on what you know about vascular and non-vascular plants. You can use an infographic or a Google document or a Google presentation. However you want to do it is totally fine with me. But that'll be an activity that we do in class. And it will be fun.